Hello and welcome back to the channel. It's been nearly 12 months since the last video on this channel, and I thought I should address that first of all. The simple truth is there has been very little to make content about. I've made very few changes to the temporary sim in the front bedroom. I've made very few configuration changes. I've flown very little other than with friends on a once or twice week basis. So I haven't done any long flights or planned flights to make videos of, and I haven't really spent much time working on projects to make videos about. Which is not to say that it's been a completely dead year, just that I wasn't able to film some of the work I was doing, and therefore I couldn't really make videos about it during the year. But I wanted to make an end of year summary video, show you the one or two things that I have done, and then talk about what's going to happen next on this channel. You can probably already see there's some interesting stuff behind me that you will not have seen before, and all of that relates to my plans for next year and my plans for the sim in general. So let's have a look at the current state of the sim, the things that have been done over the last year, and then we can talk a bit about what's next for this channel. So this is the current state of the sim, and if it doesn't look very different than it did 12 months ago, that's because it's not very different than it was 12 months ago. I've done very little to the sim in terms of the physical setup, and I've done very little to the sim in terms of the software setup. In fact, I've done very little to the sim this year at all, and that's for lots of reasons, which I'm not going to go into here, but they are boring and mundane and just mean I really haven't had the time or the content to make any videos that I considered to be worthwhile. But there were one or two projects done this year, and there are one or two differences between how things look and work now than they did 12 months ago. And I think those are worth going into because they do change and affect things that I've previously told you about. So let's have a look at those now. So the first thing that I want to call out is this panel here, which is the lower panel on the pedestal. Now, if you don't remember what it used to look like in my previous video, it used to look like this. And as you can see, it's changed fairly radically. In fact, this whole panel has been completely replaced. Now, the pedestal used to function around the Thrustmaster TCA throttle quadrant system. And if you remember, for flying jets, I would use the TCA throttle quadrant unit or units. I had two of them for 4-engine jets, with the speed brake and flaps levers, which were also part of that arrangement, but which I had separated out and put separately on this lower panel. So I always had the Thrustmaster TCA throttle quadrant system in this pedestal, even if I wasn't using the throttle quadrants. The quadrant would be fitted inside the unit, and then I would swap out to this panel that you see now for the VirtualFly TQ6. But fundamentally, the Thrustmaster setup was the core of this system. Now, that was always intended to be temporary, and I always wanted to replace it with discrete units for the speed brake and the flaps, and new units for jet throttles, and I have succeeded in doing both of those through this year. So this unit that you can see with the speed brake and flaps on it is taken from my Throttletek flight box. And if you don't recall what that used to look like, it used to look like this. And I was able to take out and separate the speed brake and flaps units and rewire them, put them on a separate interface card so I could use them as an independent USB device. And that took quite a long time because, to be honest, it wasn't the most straightforward thing to do, certainly a lot less straightforward than I thought it was when I cooked up the plan to do that. And so it was several months before I got round to it, but I finally did that in summer of this year, and since then I've had this unit configured like this. Now, the second new element on this panel is this parking brake control. If you remember, on the old panel I had just a key switch, which I'd fitted a custom knob onto, and that provided me with the 90-degree turn mechanism that emulates what you would use in a real Airbus, for example, but it didn't give me any of the additional tactile feedback that you get from Airbus, where you have to lift and turn the unit because otherwise it's locked in place. So I sourced this from an outfit in Germany, although I am considering fabricating my own version of this, and that's something that I'll document on the channel next year. This allows me to pull and turn the handle, and in fact I have to pull it, otherwise it doesn't move, and it gives me a decent amount of spring resistance, probably comparable to the real air. I then had an additional Stream Deck Mini fitted compared to the one which I had on the previous panel, and that gives me an expansion in terms of the number of custom buttons that I can have on this unit. I made a little surround for them, which is unfortunately partially broken at the moment, but that's okay because, and this will not surprise you if you followed this channel for any length of time, I'm not happy with this and I'm going to replace it. So I'm going to keep the speed brake and flaps levers. They are good working units, and I really couldn't replace these without doing an awful lot of fabrication work myself, which I'm just not capable of right now. But I am going to rebuild the panel. I'm going to change the orientation of things, and in particular, I'm going to attempt to build my own backlit panels, which is something I've not done before, and which, after quite a considerable amount of time researching it this year, I have realized is nowhere near as simple as I thought it was going to be. But I have acquired the capability to do it now. I just need to actually learn how to use that capability and then go ahead and do it. And that's going to be a series of videos on the channel in 2024. Then the next thing I want to call out is the throttle panel itself. So although this is as it was in a previous video, so I showed you a photo of it as it was, I have added, as you can see on the left-hand side there, a trim wheel. Now that is a 3D printed object. I found a design on Thingiverse that I liked, and then I adapted it to fit in the space that I had available. And after a few attempts, I managed to print it out so that it worked. And it's just basically an entirely 3D printed mechanism with a rotary encoder embedded in it, which then goes to the same Leo Bodnar card, which is already powering the engine start and fuel switches on this panel. But again, it will come as no surprise when I say that I'm not happy with this panel either, and I'm going to replace it as well. Now, I'm keeping the VirtualFly TQ6, of course, because it's a great unit, and I'm probably going to keep the mounting mechanism because that took quite a lot of time to make. But I'm going to remake the panel surface. I'm going to move the throttle off to the right a little bit to give me some more space for a slightly better trim wheel assembly. And I'm going to go ahead and print another trim wheel, but I'm going to try and learn lessons from my previous attempt and do it better. And then finally, I want to replace the whole engine start area again with a backlit panel. And once I've got the backlit panel technique done for the parking brake here, for example, I can then move on to this one. And then the third thing that I want to call out that I did is related to another throttle for this panel. So having stated that I wanted to get rid of the Thrustmaster TCA throttle quadrant system, I then required a new throttle for jet use. Now, very, very originally, I'd intended to take the 4 thrust lever throttle quadrant from the Throttletek flight box, just as I did with the speed brake and flaps here, and turn those into an independent unit. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that A, that's going to be an awful lot of work, B, there's a lot about that throttle system that I'd like to improve, and that could take several months, and C, it really isn't ideal for flying most jet aircraft, which mostly have 2 engines, not 4. So I actually went ahead and ordered a new throttle from Throttletek, which is a replica of an A320 throttle, because that gives me probably the most flexibility in terms of a twin jet throttle. And I ordered that back in January, hoping to make a video about building it into the system relatively quickly thereafter, but was then told that it would not be available until July due to a backlog of orders. So 6 months came, 6 months went, and eventually it turned up, but by that point I was kind of in the weeds of things to the extent that I wasn't able to document the build and setup of a panel for that throttle. But I can remedy that now, so let's go and take a look at that project. So this is the new throttle panel that I built for my pedestal, and it incorporates the A320 throttle quadrant unit from Throttletek, which you can see here. Now this is, as always from Throttletek, a very nice unit that looks an awful lot like the real thing. It's got a very satisfying action with very positive detents that I very much like, and it's got type accurate reverser levers, which then allow you to bring the throttles back, and then they slap back when you push it forward again. So this is a good simulacrum of an A320 throttle, and it works pretty much as you would expect. It just needs configuring in SPAD.Next. Now, I will say there are some minor issues with this throttle setup. One in particular is how the backlighting is done, and the fact that all of this is painted acrylic, which is fine, except if you knock it, you actually end up chipping the paint off. So you might be able to see just down here, there is a paint chip, as a result of which when the backlighting is on, I get a hot spot here. What I'm probably going to do is just paint over that in a silver paint, so it looks a bit like scratched metal. In fact, I might do a little bit of distressing across the whole of the throttle just to make it look a little bit more like an aged unit in a real aircraft. And then we've got the engine start panel. This just replicates what I had on the Thrustmaster TCA system. In fact, this knob actually is from the Thrustmaster TCA system, which is why it's a little bit smaller. I'm going to 3D print a replacement for that at some point. And then additionally, I have this trim wheel mechanism. Now that probably required the most fabrication of anything on this build. It's made out of wood. I had to buy and learn how to use a router to make this happen, and it's okay. It's not terrible, but it's certainly not brilliant. It doesn't look anything like a real Airbus throttle, although type accuracy is not really a thing in my project because it's not an Airbus sim, and probably never will be. I just happen to like the look of the Airbus controls. So this is integrated into the panel using a kind of a capsule unit, onto the side of which the mechanism for the trim wheel has been mounted. So let's just come down and have a look at that. So again, this is something I made myself. It's honestly a little bit rough and ready, and it took me quite a lot of bodgery to get this to work the way that I wanted it to, but it does, and it's okay. You can see the wiring of the switches underneath here. Actually, one thing to point out is that these are proper locking switches, very similar to what you'd find in the real aircraft, although they wouldn't be standing as proud as this in the real aircraft. And I'm fairly sure these switch caps, which I 3D printed, are a little bit taller than they should be. Certainly they should be a lot closer to the panel, so I think I might make them shorter or find a way to mount these switches underneath the panel in such a way that they just poke through the way they would in the real aircraft. But you can't just move these, you have to pull in order to pull it over the gate in order to change the state of those. And that was a recent addition, which I'm quite happy with. Then if we look at the trim wheel unit itself, it's actually pretty simple. So it's just a wooden wheel with a dowel that goes through it that spins on the plate on the other side of it. And then I've got this wheel here with just some kind of felt pads on to give it a little bit of resistance to turning. And then I've got a rotary encoder in here, which actually picks up the turns. And then the rotary encoder sends those signals to the Leo Bodnar card, which you can just about see underneath there. That's how it all works. It's pretty straightforward. Just actually modeling it and getting it built was the most difficult thing. Now, it's become a bit of a theme in this video, but I'm not happy with this and I'm going to replace it. So I want to replace this whole assembly with a proper backlit panel. Again, same theme as with the other panels. I want to replace these switch caps with something a little bit more designed and appropriate. If I can get them turned out of metal, which I might be able to do, then so much the better. And we'll see if that's a service that I can get from someone. I'm obviously going to keep the Throttletek throttle because, well, firstly, it was very expensive, and secondly, it's a perfectly good piece of kit. I may make some cosmetic updates to it just to, as I say, make it look a little bit more lived in. But other than that, I'm very happy with it, and it's performed nicely over quite a few duty cycles. In particular, I like the backlighting. I just don't like the way that if you ding the paint, it shows through, but there's not a lot you can do about that. because of the mechanism that they've used for the backlighting. And I will talk about that in much more detail in a future video about making backlit panels, because I was inspired by their mechanism, but I've gone, I think, to the next level, and hopefully the technique that I have designed is going to work when I finally get around to trying it out early in the new year. So that's the panel for the Throttletek throttle. This is basically my twin jet panel now, and I can swap it in and out relatively easily, although there is a bit of jiggery pokery with wires to do. And I figured it would be good just to show the whole pedestal with this panel in and all backlit up and the control over the backlighting. So let's have a look at that right now. Right, so I'm going to show you the whole swap process, because why not? So first of all, start out by just moving these levers out of the way so that they don't foul anything here. And then this panel can be removed just by lifting this by the levers. Don't worry, it's all metal, it won't break anything. So I'll pull that out. I'll just put it over on the seat for a second so I can reach in, find the USB cables, of which there are 2, and pull them. Doesn't matter if I yank them, because my USB hub down there is actually Velcro to the bottom of the structure. Move that one out of the way, and normally I just put that on a shelf somewhere, and then bring the jet throttle into play. So again, I'll put it down on the seat for a minute, and I need to sort out the cabling. So again, it's got 2 USB plugs, which means I need to find the right sockets for them down here. A little bit of fumbling around, there we go. And then I've got one other cable I need to connect, which is this cable, which is for the backlighting, or rather for the backlighting switch. So I need to fish in here until I find the end that I want, which is here, and then bring these 2 together. There we go. And then I can take this whole arrangement, and being slightly ginger and careful about it, I can drop it into place. And now it's connected. So then I can put these back where they should go. Okay, so it's now in place, and I could be using it in the sim if I had the sim fired up, which I don't. And I mostly interface this through SPAD.Next, but I did say I wanted to show you how the backlighting works. And so I've got the backlighting wired up to my relay control card, which controls the other cockpit lighting, so that I can control that in software. And I wrote a little utility that will let me do that with keyboard shortcuts, which I can then generate from SPAD.Next, so that I can tie light events into SPAD.Next controls. So if I use this key combo here, you can see it turns on the main lighting in the cockpit, and this one will turn it off. And the same thing, if I do it with this one, you can see the backlighting is turned on for the pedestal. And that activates the backlighting for all of the panels simultaneously. And when I've gone ahead and rebuilt all of these panels with new backlit panels, it will turn on all of the backlighting simultaneously. Now, at the moment, I cannot control the level of the backlighting. It is strictly on or off. I don't think any of these LEDs are actually dimmable. So it may be that's not something I can do. I believe you can do that in the real aircraft. But that may be a level that I can't go to unless I'm literally willing to go through and strip out all the LEDs and replace them with dimmable ones, which I don't think I am. But that's it. That's the extent of the changes that I've made in 2023. And although I'm enjoying flying with this throttle setup, and I like the backlighting, the simple fact is there's not enough backlighting in the whole sim to make it completely usable in a nighttime environment. I'd want my main switch panel to be backlit. I'd want other elements to be backlit, and they aren't. So one of the big themes for 2024 is going to be new backlit panels. And that's something where hopefully I'll be able to give you plenty of useful content about how you might be able to do that yourself, because it's something I think a lot of people would like to do, but are not currently able to do. And actually, although it's a complicated subject, it's not as difficult as you might imagine it is. It's not something that only a professional manufacturer can do. A hobbyist can do it. You just need the right tools. Unfortunately, the right tools are expensive, and they require quite a lot of learning to learn how to use properly. And you can join me on that journey in 2024. So there you have it. That's a summary of pretty much everything I've done to the sim in 2023. And as you can see, that's not an awful lot. Now, I do have plans to do a lot more with the sim in 2024, and over the last few months I've been picking up tools and equipment and learning new techniques so that I can take my fabrication skills to the next level, so that when I get around to starting the new cockpit project here in the back bedroom, I will be able to go to a level well above what I had before. But in the meantime, the temporary sim in the front bedroom is where it's at. I'm going to be doing upgrades and replacements of parts there as I learn new techniques to demonstrate those on videos. So we will be filming in there for the foreseeable future. And therefore, it doesn't make sense for me to continue to call myself the back bedroom pilot, because here I am in my back bedroom and I don't have a simulator in here anymore. I also don't want to call myself the front bedroom pilot because that just sounds weird. So I'm going to rebrand the channel and change the name to reflect the identity which I use when I'm simming online, which is Flyer10. Now, if you want to know what that name's all about, well, it was available on Xbox as a gamer tag, so I picked it. There's no more significance than that. But that will be the branding of the channel going forward, so look forward to that change early in the new year. That means it will be a good time for you to subscribe if you're not already subscribed. And if you do, then it will be a good time to click the little bell icon so you know when I publish a video, because it can be a while between videos sometimes. And if you like the video, it would be useful if you click the like button. Equally, if you disliked it, it would be useful if you click the dislike button so that I know. And if you have a question or a comment that you want to make, please leave it in the comments below. I try to answer all questions as quickly as I can. In the meantime, though, if you have already entered 2024, because I'm filming this on December the 31st here in the UK, then Happy New Year. Hope 2024 is a great year for you. If you have not yet entered the new year, like us here in the UK, then Happy New Year for tonight. I hope you have a great party, because you are having a party, right? And I look forward to seeing all of you back here on the channel in the new year very soon.